Welcome into Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts with CPA and personal financial specialist, Phil Putney. Now let's get rolling with today's show. Hey everybody, welcome into Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts. Mark and Phil back again to talk investing, finance, and retirement. Are good money habits holding you back? Good money habits. That sounds like a weird one, but I want to talk, Phil, about
Sometimes
some good habits. I want to talk about some good habits that maybe we take a little too far or something like that. And just kind of do some pros and cons, good and bad, of good habits, which sounds a little counterintuitive.
Something to look at after the first of the year here.
Yeah, for sure. So it's cold currently while we're taping this. And
it is cold.
Yeah.
We are in the deep freeze. We were talking ahead of time. We haven't seen double digits in probably 4 days now. So but it's Michigan.
But it's also hot because the Lions won their first playoff game.
It is very hot. Yeah, that's
so
pretty.
Everybody's excited, and they're hosting a second one now. So everybody's just super stoked. So the fan base.
So the town's going crazy in spite of it. So
that's right. That's good. That's very good. So you doing all right?
Yeah, doing good. Good.
Tax season starting to ramp up.
Yeah, not yet. We're getting everything in line for it. So people don't have all their documents yet, but that's coming right around the corner. So
well, I tell you what, like I said, it's good to have good habits, right? Certainly getting your tax stuff in,
absolutely,
and getting it in sooner certainly makes your CPAs happy.
Yes.
So versus waiting to the last minute, so that's a good habit. But that's not on my list right this minute. But let's talk about a couple of these things. So here's what I'm going to do.
Sure.
I'm going to give you the kind of the general category. And then we'll kind of set up, I'll do the good a little bit, and then you kind of give me the counterpoint, right? And then we'll just kind of hash through it a little bit. So let's start with ignoring our account statements. Now, I said ignoring them, right? So you get them, you throw them in the financial junk drawer, the filing cabinet, you never look at them, right? I mean, I guess the good side would be that it keeps you from opening it up, especially in the last couple of years, it's been rocky, and being like, oh no, it's down. I got to do something, right? So it keeps you kind of from overreacting, but it's probably not a good habit to just ignore your statements.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it depends on what you do with that information. I mean, if you're a very reactive type of person and it's going to cause you to panic.
Right.
Well, I still can't say ignore them, but, maybe look at them in a couple of days or, so a little bit beyond that. So you can look at the statement and then look at it, to see, okay, where's it at today? Or, have some kind of a mechanism set up in place that, you won't make a move before you talk to your financial advisor or talk it over with, if you're working with, another friend or buddy of yours, colleague that is familiar with finances, so you at least can bounce your reactions off somebody. But
you and I were just talking about being hacked. And granted, there's the online stuff, but I mean, like if you're not looking at them, what if you happen to miss something random or something weird,
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the bad side of not looking at statements is just that, even from an investment standpoint. I mean, you don't want to bury your head in the sand, in 3-4 years from now, look at it and say, what happened? I thought I was making these contributions, or I thought I was in this, or I was, whatever. You don't want to be in that scenario to not be able to react in a positive way.
Right.
To something that
those
isn't
odds
going
are
the way
slim,
you planned. So,
those odds are slim, but still, I mean, it's just a good idea to keep keep tabs.
Absolutely.
On things.
Yeah. So especially as it relates to like bank accounts, credit card statements, things of that nature. Yeah, absolutely.
Credit card for sure. Yeah.
Monthly, just to make sure that what's on there. You recognize them. Somebody's not got your information.
Yeah.
It's easy to set up.
And most of us do like fraud alerts, and
most
of us do that. But your investment account's not really the same way in that respect.
Yeah, the investment account, again, like I said, it really depends on what you're doing with it. I mean, if you like to track it on a monthly basis, and I've got a lot of engineer clients that like spreadsheets, so they'll track it, put it into a spreadsheet monthly. That's fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Pay attention to where it's at. But it's just a matter of overreacting, right? I mean, so if it's going to cause you to overreact and question where you're at, that's not the right time to kind of analyze your plan, I should say, right?
Yeah, moderation and balance is probably going to be the key in this whole conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, you should have a plan you're following, but second guessing that plan at the bottom of a market is the wrong time. I mean, that's not the time you should be, thinking, oh, maybe I'm not as risk adverse as I thought I was. Now it's too late. Now
Oh,
you're going to make decisions at the wrong time. So
and I
emotional
forgot.
decisions. So
Yeah, definitely. And I forgot to say at the top of this podcast, by the way, we got 10 of these. We're going to do it in two parts. So we'll do
okay,
5 this week and then we'll do 5 next week,
sounds
just to
good.
keep the time down a little bit. So yeah, I mean, that one's kind of simple, right? I can see the pro to it where you're thinking, I just don't want to look. It's been rough out there, but just do yourself make sure you're keeping tabs.
Yeah,
Let's go to keeping a strict budget. Okay.
yeah,
Now, clearly
oh yeah,
good here is that you've built discipline, right? I mean, that's hard to do. Discipline's tough, right? And so you've probably accomplished some goals that you wanted to with saving, or even spending or whatever. But obviously, clearly the bad side, Phil, here is that, and this is what a lot of retirees struggle with. When you get to retirement, maybe you're too afraid to now enjoy what you built.
yeah. And the B word, right, so to speak. You bring that up all the time. Oh, budget. I just can't do that. So again, a lot of it depends on your personality and what you need to do, even. So back to I've got a lot of engineer clients that enjoy that. They love tracking. They've been, their whole career tracked and monitored things. So this is just what they're used to do. They enter the details in a, spreadsheet every month. And
Right.
I mean, if that's you, great. There's nothing wrong with that. Be conscious of a spouse, because very often both parties in a marriage are not on the same page. And this is something my wife and I struggled with early on in marriage is, I'm that detail type of person. And she's like, it just doesn't work. How do we make this work?
How does this happen?
So yeah, I mean, it's got to be one of those scenarios where you guys come together and you're detailed if you're that person.
Mm-hmm.
Don't drive the spouse crazy because you're banging them over the head all the time with we're $10 over budget and whatever it is.
Yeah, you could
It
get a
needs to
little
be
too restrictive.
yeah, it needs to be a guideline. So there's a lot of ways to do it. I mean, a lot of online softwares now. In fact, our client portal, if you connect your bank account, your credit cards, it'll bring those transactions in and automatically track them for you. So I mean, if you
Oh,
do want to
that's
see
cool.
that,
Yeah.
it's a way of doing that. And there's other websites that'll do that for you as well.
Right.
But I
Well,
mean,
and
if
I was going to say, so let me ask you about that point of so many people when they get to retirement, they come in and see, right, there's their advisor, and they're like, okay, it's time for retirement. I'm here, and I know we got this plan, but I'm really nervous about pulling money out, especially when the market's being a little wonky or the economy's being wonky or inflation's high, right? So how do you kind of work through that? Because that's really a mental thing. Like you've saved all this money, you've got to be able to
absolutely.
access it to enjoy it. How do you kind of walk people through that part of it?
Well, I mean, that is a big hurdle. In fact, it's probably one of the biggest hurdles for most people that, have saved all their life kind of crossing that bridge of all of a sudden, I'm taking money out of this account where for 20 plus years, 30 years, maybe you've been contributing and watching it grow every day, or every month. And now you're at the point of starting to spend it. And I mean, at some point it will start to come down. And the fact of the matter is that's why it's there, right? I mean, that is the whole purpose of saving for retirement is so that you can spend it. So it is an emotional challenge and it takes time to bridge through that. For some people, others it's, hey, I'm ready. This is, that's why
Sure.
I
Yeah.
saved it. Let's go.
Everybody's different. Yeah.
Right. So
And I
you
imagine
have to
seeing it
have
in
that
black and
balance.
I would say, imagine seeing it in black and white, right? So I guess for some of those folks who are struggling early on with that, letting it go, so to speak,
Right.
is that where do they maybe need more hand holding or more coaching or more, sessions or something with their advisor to kind of see, okay, here's the numbers are still here, or here's what's happening. Does that sometimes help those folks?
For anyone, it really helps having a plan and running the numbers out, the math to see, does it work? What do I need on a monthly basis? And getting back to kind of that budget concept we're talking about here, I mean, a budget doesn't have to be a detailed budget that says, I spent this amount on utilities and
Right.
gas and
Right.
groceries and food. I mean, it can be, hey, my monthly spend is $3,000,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it happens to be, and in financial planning, we need to understand that. What is your monthly need for income? And then that's how you can plan forward to say, okay, if I need 3, 4, 5, 10,000 a month, whatever your number is, okay, now we've got a target to show where are we going to take the money from. And in having a strategy set up so that you're not reacting based on what's happening in a market, so that when the markets are volatile, you're not feeling uncomfortable about pulling out this monthly income because you've got a strategy set up that says, we plan for this. We understand this is going to happen.
And if you need a little extra coaching, I mean, that's the point of having that coach, right? Is to go be
Right.
like, okay, look,
Absolutely.
I'm really struggling. The market's pretty rocky or whatever. I'm feeling weird taking all this money out or so whatever. How do we get through that? That's where again the coaching comes in. So
I
again,
mean,
it's a good.
it's on the other side of that too, because there's some clients that are too free in retirement, right? They're
Oh,
like, hey, I
sure,
saved all
yeah.
this money. Let's, I've got this
Woohoo!
time, I've got all these things I've been waiting to do. And you've got to be really careful with that, because if you spend too much too quickly up front, I mean, it can dramatically change a plan. I always liken it to, if you think of an airplane flying from Detroit to LA, I mean, it's a long flight, and being off just a little bit up front. I mean, you might not be in LA, you might be in Mexico or Canada, so if you take way too much out up front, I mean, it can dramatically change, or too little even. I mean, either way, it can dramatically change what that, 10,
Yeah, and then
15,
you got to
20-year
land.
plan looks like.
Then
So
you got to land in Kansas, and it's
that's
colder even there. And who wants to be in Kansas? No, I'm kidding. If you're in Kansas, I'm
right.
just kidding. Don't get it. All right, so there. So yeah, again, yeah, the good and the bad of a budget,
Right.
right? So be careful there, and that's what we're doing. We're talking about some good and bads here of some of good money habits. So let's go to number 3: investing in familiar stocks. I mean, sage wisdom, right? Invest in things right? That's always been a good thing.
I mean, there's
Uh,
strategies around that from an investment
Sure,
standpoint. And
but
it's,
let me kind of pose it to you this way, especially in the Motor City area, right? So let's say that somebody worked at one of the big three for 30 years, 35 years, and they pass on and they leave a stock or something, their stock to their kids, right? Part of their legacy plan, and they're like, well, it's probably not doing me good. Or like you're looking at it and you're like, you really don't need this, or this, there's a better way to use your money. And they're
right.
like, I don't want to sell it because it was dad's, right? So,
Right.
or something like that. So sometimes an attachment to something in an investment is not the best way to go. Even if, like you really love the company or the family did or whatever,
Absolutely.
you need to think about it a little more objectively. So that's where maybe the bad habit comes in. If you're a little
Yeah.
too, I mean, you could go Enron as an example for this too, but I thought I would try to take it a little bit more close to home.
So investing in things, I mean, it can look at it a lot of different ways. I mean, that is actually an investment strategy of saying, okay, where am I spending my money? Okay, so let's pick the top companies, 10 companies that I spend with, and maybe invest in those companies. Okay, that's an investment strategy. But there's a lot of risk in that. Number one, I mean, it's all stock, right? So, I mean, if
Right.
your risk tolerance isn't at that level, well, then that's a problem right there. Secondly, I mean, if you're a techie like I am,
Right.
all of a sudden you're, very tech heavy in your portfolio, and maybe that's not good either, right? So, I mean, there's pros and cons to it. It's a strategy. It's something to understand. But to your point too, it comes down to that familiarity. And more often where we see this is that scenario of, I've got retirees that have worked at one of the big three automakers in our neck of the woods for all their career, right? 20, 30 years. So when we start to work with them, their 401ks at the company, and they might have a vast majority of that invested in company stock, or maybe now they also have an employee stock savings plan because they've got incentives, and they have a pension. So now when you look at here's their entire retirement portfolio, including income, they've got 50, 60, 70, 80% of their retirement tied up in one company,
And then you're moving into
not
that
to mention
Enron
one
category.
industry. Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, that, and there's nothing wrong necessarily with any of these companies, but things
No, no,
happen,
no, no. Right. But things happen.
so
Yeah.
it's a matter of kind of stepping back from the emotional side of the attachment and saying, okay, that's great. I love the company, nothing against it, but let's pare it down to something that's more reasonable from a risk standpoint. And that's our job as an advisor, is to show the kind of the other side of it, right? And help walk through that emotional side of, okay, I get the commitment and they've done very well for you for your whole career. Do you really want to tie the rest of your retirement and your family's legacy up in one company?
Yeah. That's a great point.
So
Yeah. And again, so there's balance, right? So if you've
it
got
always
some,
comes down to balance.
if you've got some
Absolutely.
emotional attachments, then maybe it's a way to go, okay, let's keep a little, but let's not get
Yep.
crazy, right? So,
Right.
okay.
Right.
All right. Let's do the next one here. Number 4, embracing automation. Certainly in today's world, right? There's, I mean, that's a good thing, right? There's tons of it out there. And look, it makes it easy to make sure you pay your bills on time and you don't get, late fees or whatever. You can set a lot of auto pays up. And even for investing, if you're still working, if you're a pre-retiree, or even younger, you're just pumping in through your check. That's great, right? So on that side, but don't go so far. I guess maybe here, I kind of like the statements, don't get detached. Like, don't get too detached because it's so automated.
So automation is a great tool. I mean, from an investment standpoint, you kind of set it, forget it, so to speak. It's happening on a regular basis. You're not having to remember to write the check to, make that monthly deposit. I mean, you're used to it. If you've contributed to a 401k, it just comes out of the check every month or pay. So it's a much easier process. Same thing can happen in retirement when it comes to distribution. So the clients that we work with, it's not like we're having, the investment companies send them a check every month. We have an automated distribution set up that on the 1st, the 15th, whatever their day of the month is, that they want to see that direct deposit. It just happens. They get a direct deposit in their account. So having automation is great, even on the back to the budgeting standpoint, building automation in there because it can help you.
Oh, yeah, true. Yeah.
Free up some time. I mean, you don't have to sit down at the end of the month and write all these bills out. And the whole process that it used to be of, stuff in the envelope, put the stamps on them. I mean, it can be done electronically.
I have to do that today, as a matter of fact.
You don't have those paper cuts anymore. You don't have to lick those envelopes, all those crazy things you used to have to do. And it keeps you more on track, But to your point, the downside to automation is the detachment from it. It's easy, to get away from monthly subscriptions. I mean, everything we have today is some kind of a subscription.
How many people have stuff they don't need? We talked about that a million times.
You look at your credit card statement. It's like, wait a minute, count up, all these monthly or quarterly, annual, whatever it is, subscriptions that you have, and when's the last time you used it?
Yeah, or you just look at something. For example, we were just talking about football earlier, and on the first week of the playoffs, for the first time ever, they put one of the games on Peacock, and it was only available, even though that's NBC wasn't going to carry it on the regular channels. You had to subscribe to their little thing. And so you go, well, it's only $5.99. I'll just go ahead and subscribe real quick, then I'll just cancel it. Well, maybe you didn't cancel it.
And then they give you that 30-day, 30 days for free. You got to put all your credit card information in ahead of time.
And maybe
of course
you did
they're not
do it,
going to remind you.
Right. Maybe you did do it. Maybe you didn't. Right. Next thing you know, 2 years later, you're like, oh man. And granted, it's only $5.99 a month, but times 10. Or whatever, So,
So, I mean, automation, it's a great tool, but just don't use it to your advantage to free up time to make sure things happen on a regular basis.
Exactly.
But don't have total disconnection from it. Then review it. It comes back to those statements. Number one, don't ignore the monthly statements. Sit down once a month and just even, whether it's online, even just looking at the transactions weekly, whatever it is, pay attention to what's going on with your finances.
For sure. All right. Well, let's do the last one this week, Phil, and then we'll come back with more next week. And as we did automation. So let's do patience with the stock market, getting into the stock market. Again, okay. Obvious good here is nothing wrong with, avoiding, jumping on something, acting irrationally, right. Or maybe not doing your due diligence.
Right.
But the bad is, look, you can wait around forever or whatever the case is, right? Or you think about people who lost a lot in '08 and then they had a little too much patience getting back in because they had no idea that they was going to go on a 13-year run. I've talked to several people that got out in '08 and '09 when they got burned badly, and I understand that, but they waited almost 5 years before they got back in. And there was a lot of growth in that early run from 2010 to, 2014 or so. Right.
And when did you get out? I mean, did you ride it all the way down or, 3/4 of the way down?
Oh, they got out when they got burnt at 50% loss. Right. So, so now, they're like, I'm not losing anymore. So, yeah. Yeah.
So it really comes back to that emotional side. Understand yourself emotionally and try not to react emotionally. So that's where it's important to have that advisor, to have a strategy, a plan in place that you can
talk me off the ledge, Phil. Talk me off the ledge.
And I mean, that's part of our job.
Yeah.
And I mean, if we've done our job right up front, we understand, we've had that discussion with you. So we have already kind of preempted this with you to say, okay, this, I understand, here's your risk tolerance. Here's how
Right.
we've got that positioned. But yeah, at the end of the day, if that is your scenario, don't make that emotional decision, right? So timing a market like that is real tricky. In fact, I've got a client that I started working with from a planning standpoint over a year ago. And when we were first meeting together, this was, right at the end of 2022, where, market had a bad year, and going into 23, and he was, all happy with his advisor because he got him out and had him in cash, and so he was pretty thrilled, and, hadn't had a lot of the downturn, had some of it. And we met a couple of times throughout 2023 now. And actually, he's coming in tomorrow because his advisor still doesn't have him back in the market. And he's talked to his advisor, and it's like, what is going on?
Right.
So
right.
Getting in or out of a market isn't the problem. It's having a plan that's not emotional, right? So and that really is what it comes down to, is if you're going to get out, why? Don't make it an emotional decision. Follow some metrics as this is why, or when am I going to get back in? What's that metric to go back in? And don't let it be that gut feeling, that emotional of, when I think it's right. Well, to your point, it never feels right, because, this,
Right.
I already missed it. It's got to come back down. And, now you look back 6 months and it's like, oh man, it went up another 15%.
Right.
It's like, and now you're like,
it's 13-year run.
It's too close to the top. I can't get in now. It's like, so it's just us. That's it. We're emotional beings, that's why we can't make or shouldn't make investment decisions based on that emotion.
Yeah. And again, that's where a strategy is going to come into play. So patience, nothing wrong with it. It's a good habit to have.
It's a good habit to have.
My dad used to say, if it's a good deal today, it'll still be a good deal tomorrow. And I always thought that was an interesting way to kind of pause and think about something before you buy it. However, at some point you can do that to yourself every day. Well, it was a good day for 2 days. It was a good deal 2 days ago. It'll be still a good deal next week. It'll still be a good deal next month.
And then inflation happens. And
then, not saying that you have to run out and do something, but again, a cohesive strategy and looking at what's going on will kind of help you with that versus just reacting and jumping in and out. Because the world is just going to continue to stay pretty choppy, I'm sure. 24 is going to stay quite choppy with an election year and everything else. So if every time something wiggles, you feel the need to jump, you could be doing yourself more harm than good. So if you need some help, you need a strategy, you've got good habits, but you want to be, a little bit better about what you're doing or just safe about what you're doing or whatever that might be for you, reach out to a qualified professional. Make sure you're having a conversation. Certainly reach out to Phil if you'd like. He is a CPA and a personal financial specialist, and you can find him at 248-888-7530. I just had a brain fart. Is that right? I've been saying it for years without looking. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. Make sure you reach out to a professional like Phil or anybody else, but just make sure you reach out to somebody. Phil, of course, is a qualified professional. He's a CPA and a personal financial specialist. It's 248-888-7530. The number's on the screen if you want to check it out in video form. And by saying that, actually, you can find us on Apple and Spotify on audio form and also on YouTube in audio and video form as well. So you can subscribe to us at philstaxhacks.com. That's philstaxhacks.com. And Phil will get up out of here and we'll come back next week and do 5 more.
Sounds good.
All right. We'll see you next time here on Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts.
Phil?
Investment advisory services offered through AFS Wealth Management. The content of this program is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. Investments and/or investment strategies involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will achieve its objectives.